Hello and welcome back to Refskeggs Streaming Class, running the stream and day of. This is going to be part 3 of the series, and we're going to talk first about how to place gear. Placing gear is very dependent on the activities that you have going. Usually we're going to talk about quartz as the first and foremost. For the shotgun microphone, we recommend that you place that obviously pointed at the stage. You don't want it next to them, you want it pointed directly up at them. This is either going to be up front of the stage with some kind of cover, a potted plant, nothing that's going to obscure around it because it will need all that noise for echo cancellation. Or more than likely it's just going to end up on a tripod within the first row of court right next to your camera. Now that court camera is also going to be up front row, sometimes second row, really depends on the layout. You want to make sure you get a good view away. If you can be in the second row and capture people that walk up to get the awards, or even people that stand up to speak, that's always a great idea as well. But really we want to make sure we are capturing the royalty and anyone who's up in front of them. Now we're going to talk about the overhead camera. This is the most amazing feature that's come out. Gira recommended this for 12th night in 2022. And it's been the most requested thing we've done since. So this overhead camera is the one that's going to be placed up over the nobility and the royalty, and it's going to be able to go down and get the face of the recipient. And since this whole project is about bearing good witness, that's one of the most important things that we do. So the best place is going to be right above them and up high. We like off the shoulder rather than in between the two royals. Very often, I'm just going to use king and queen as an example. King and queen will come together. They will be holding hands together or something like that, so your shot of the person will be blocked, which is why we recommend over a shoulder. If you can't get an over the shoulder shot, you can always place it off to the side, and we've had to do that in a few instances. And one of the things you can do as well is to change the position of the kneeling pillow or the bench. Just shift it ever so slightly so that when the person sits down, they're going to naturally start looking at where the camera is going to be placed, or they'll nudge it over a little bit as needed. If you are going to do this, let them know, let the royalty and the retinue know why you've changed it so they don't try to adjust it back in the middle of everything. Another great thing that you can do is just put an X or a little marker of tape on the ground. A lot of us are theater geeks, and so we're going to know instantly what that means, and even if we don't consciously do it, we'll start gravitating towards that spot. One of the really big things I always want to emphasize is this shouldn't detract from anything that's happening on site. So make sure when you do set up this gear, it's not in the way, especially for royal courts or any kind of court. The retinue needs to be able to shift and move in and out and around. So try not to set up a big tripod right in the middle of their run. And if you have any cables, tape them down 1,000 times. Make sure no one trips and takes everything down. You don't want to be the reason someone gets hurt. One of the hard things is making sure that whatever you set up can be troubleshot live, or as close to live as you can get. This is really hard because often these cameras are stuck up top. They're very visible, so we can't get to them. But a lot of times the laptop that's running them, we might be able to put on an extension cord and get out of the way of the retinue so that we can still get back to it. And one of the things to consider as well when you're looking at the overhead camera, because of the whole opt-in, opt-out thing, it's really nice if the camera only picks up a portion of the court. You know, keep it so that the left or the right side isn't as visible, or even just a chunk of it up in the front row isn't as visible. That way you can have people go there later on. You can kind of tape that section off as well and say, hey, if you move past this point, you will be on screen. Otherwise, you'll be safe over here. One of the newer things that we've been using is the Processional Cam. These tend to be a little bit smaller and a little bit lower towards the ground so they can catch everyone coming straight up. You can also place them at the back of the court so you get as the whole processional comes in. A lot of times your overhead camera can pull double duty and also function as your processional camera, but one of the great things they're useful for is that processional camera being a little bit further up and pointed a little bit further out. It's going to be able to pick up a lot of the stuff that your primary shotgun mic will miss. One of the next things, again, use your best judgment, trust your on-site directors, show them. I'll send screenshots to my on-site directors so they know what it's looking like when they adjust things. Again, tape everything down. And then next, as we've mentioned in the first class, name your equipment clearly. Don't use main cam, main mic. Use front court camera, overhead cam. etc. Make sure everyone both on site and remotely knows. And if you do have to change it, like if you have to change from court setup to covering an Eric, make sure everyone knows what you've now renamed each piece of equipment. And then when you do go to do your audio checks, make sure you have someone both kneeling in front of the throne, standing in front of the throne, whispering, as well as people behind. You want to catch all those audio levels so you can tune everything down. And if you are the on-site director or you are setting up, remember your off-site team doesn't know what's going on. Until those cameras are set up, we're clueless. So please give them a lot of patience. That's why I like getting at least one camera set up, and then I'll worry about microphones because at least I can see what's happening. And as always, tape out your sight lines. These are so very helpful. People want to be captured on film most of the time, especially if they're coming up and doing something amazing. So if we can tell them where to be to get a great shot, they're going to naturally gravitate to that way. And place markers on the ground, little tape indenters, whatever you need to do. And then last but not least, try to think about your camera sightlines, not just for your cameras, but how your cameras are going to show up. Are they going to be big and bulky and in people's way? Can we wrap a cloak and put a hat on your camera so that no one notices when someone takes a picture from the back? Because we have awesome, amazing photographers out and around. All they see is what looks like another person. And even put a little note card or something on the back as well to remind people, hey, there is a live camera right here, and there is a live microphone right here as well. Now, I may be a little biased, but producing is probably one of the more important jobs on the team. So make sure it's your only job. Don't be trying to run cameras. Don't be trying to run comments and all that as well. Especially if you're doing something like a King and King tournament, you want to make sure that your sole focus is on getting the best possible shots. As a producer, aside from running those cameras, your number one job is make sure that your communication is open with your team. We recently used Discord for running the Principality tournament to choose their new prince and princess, and it worked great. Having that audio channel open with push to talk was so much better than sitting there to try and type. It didn't use the resources because it could be on a separate machine like Facebook would. Highly recommend integrating that into your flow going forward. And when you start, even before you start, the night before, the day of, whatever you can arrange, go over the run of show with everybody. Let them know this is when we go live, this is when we put up this banner, this is what we're expecting to happen first. We're going to do processional and then largesse exchange, and then this court will happen, and then that court will happen. Gets everybody on the same page and kind of understanding what's going to be next so they can start anticipating things. Getting over into the correct folder for all the calls to action versus the correct folder for all the awards or the correct folder for all the fighters. One of the things I also want to cover is your own gear setup. If you can, try not to run this from a single small laptop screen. I highly recommend having two monitors. Really, when I have my setup, I have one laptop with a large screen. I have two other laptops, one of them just for communications with my team. One of them just is running all of my live feeds so I can see if any changes are occurring, if any audio suddenly cuts out. Very often the live feed will let me know before anything else does. Make sure all your devices are charged. Make sure your phone is charged. You're going to be on that a lot. I usually keep two sets of headphones, one tied to my phone, one tied to the actual feed, so I can hear what's coming in and out. And last, if possible, get on a landline. Don't try to trust the Wi-Fi for that unless you have excellent Wi-Fi. It's nice. You're pushing up and pulling down so much data that a landline's usually the best way to go. And then ideally, even before the crew gets on site and starts setting everything up, double check your extras. Talk to your court liaisons, see if anything has changed on the docket. See if now that somebody's here, hey, we're going to do a surprise knighting. Make sure your banners are set up, and again, if anything's been added or removed, make sure you change those. Don't forget your bullying statement. Whatever your kingdom requires of you or your seneschal requires of you, make sure you have that up and ready to go. That's one of the more important things that we have to do. It's one of the more administrative things, but it's what keeps us a part of this. And double check your slides. Make sure they're in the right order. Pictures are the right way up. They like to change on you sometimes. Just run through it real quick. Double check your run of show. We talked about that. It's hugely important. Keep it going. Keep it updated. Make sure all of your backups, all of your directors have a copy of it. More often than not, the team that was supposed to be running it a week before is not going to be the same team running it now or in the same positions. So double check everyone has access to it. Make sure everyone has their admin access. StreamYard gets a little finicky if you try to log in new accounts very, very shortly, one after the other. When they send you that code, it'll last for 15-20 minutes. So if you have multiple people trying to do it, it'll start causing some issues. Make sure that your themes and your overlays are correct. It's one of those little things that tends to get forgotten or left off to the last minute. Just make sure you have the right ones there. You want that technical screen in case things go wrong and you can't start right away. Check your fighter cards. If you are going to be doing a tournament of some kind, having those little fighter cards up and running is great. Hopefully, if you are the producer and you're watching this, hopefully you will have given that ability or that task to somebody else so that they can provide you with that deck. And that takes a little bit more off your plate, and that's what this is really about, trying to spread the load. Many hands make light work. If you have music or video content, make sure that's in the correct order. Make sure your playlists are up and running. You know where each and every one is. All of your people know what the banners that are going to be needed, especially if a backup producer is running your banners. Make sure they know the flow and order of your playlist. Now, the actual setup of your gear is going to be so much an interplay between the producer and the on-site director. And you can only prepare for it so much. Unless it's a site you've used a ton of times, you're going to be dealing with so many new things. Where's the power outlet? What's our Wi-Fi coverage like? Why does it drop off when I stand 10 feet to the right over here? Where are the thrones getting set up? Why do we have 6 extra thrones suddenly? How do we determine who gets to be in camera and who doesn't? Because very likely you won't be able to capture all of it in one go. But once you have your gear set up, at least your overhead and your court cam, or your 2 main Erics or 4 main Erics, double check your audio. It never hurts, especially when there's a few more people in there, when there's a few less people, when we actually start getting clothing and gear and bodies around everyone. Double check your audio. Maybe the guard is standing right there and they've got enough metal on that it's causing interference on the mic. Always turn off auto adjust. I'm going to remind everyone again, StreamYards will try to auto adjust, which isn't what we want, because we want to control how it picks up soft sounds like retinue talking to royalty. So make a note of what the right volume is, make a note of what volume you've tested it at, and again, turn off auto adjust. So juggling your cameras is really the most important thing to learn for a producer. It takes a lot, and every time it's going to be a little bit different depending on the cameras you're using, the distance, the light source, so many different features. But know how they juggle, or how they take to juggle. Know how long one takes to autofocus when you jump back to it, or vice versa. Can you have both of them up at the same time without any problems, or does one of them always give you a problem if it's in the primary position? I like to keep the overhead in the primary position, or the top left. That way when I do show a screen, or show a screen share or a slideshow, that position, hopefully the overhead and the recipient, will be the one that gets up on screen without having to do any switching for it. Now, because when you have 2, say a court camera and an overhead, if you keep your overhead in pole 1 and your court camera in position 2 or front facing, whichever you've named it, then you can just hit solo button and that one pops out. Unsolo that, you get both, and then solo for overhead as needed. That way you really only have to juggle 3 to 4 different layouts. But again, know how long they take. Sometimes they take a little bit longer, so if you know someone's about to step up right in front of the camera and you want to be kind and not showcase a butt, know that how much sooner you need to make that change. Also kind of know which is going to be the best camera for processionals. Where do you get that best coverage? Is it when they step up? Is it when they're way back? Also, what microphone to jump to if you have multiple microphones. Really, one of the harder parts is trying to develop when you should go split screen or single video, especially for courts. For fighting, it's usually a lot easier when follow the action. You're going to have to use your best judgment, talk to your team, and again, so many things will impact this: lighting, camera quality, Wi-Fi coverage. Remember, our overriding idea is to bear good witness. So whenever possible, focus in on the recipient. And it's never a bad thing to have extra. While the screen may look real small to you on your laptop or on your phone, for the people watching at home on the big screen TVs, it's probably going to look a lot better and it'll probably be okay. So the hierarchy for who do we choose, how do we get people in frame, etc., at least for myself, is usually going to be elevations, vigils, lines of Vontier. Again, I'm in the Kingdom of Vontier. And then royalty, which seems a little odd to not put royalty first, but remember, we're bearing good witness. So royalty, speakers for a big award. There was an awesome little award at the last event. There's a whole cool ceremony, so we focused on them rather than on the royalty. But again, you have to play that by ear and kind of understand how your royalty feels about it, what the ceremonies are for, etc. And then grant level awards. Usually for anything lower than that, use your best judgment. It's sometimes not a bad thing to have the royalty on view, then you have to make that call. When trying to do that calculation of do we keep royalty on so we can see the nice words or see the face of the person, as long as your audio is doing its job, you're going to get those amazing, wonderful words of the royalty, and that's what will matter most to the person getting the award later. They remember what the royalty looks like. They have their face, but they're not going to remember their words. So if you can get the audio and then the face of the recipient, that's usually what I go for. I'm probably going to say this 5 or 6 times because it's very important. It's better to be late than early when showing off banners and awards. Whatever you do, don't ruin the surprise. Banners and awards should be up on screen long enough to be able to be read twice, and then you can usually take them down. Feel free to keep them up longer if you need to, but especially during courts, they tend to go very, very fast, so you kind of need to compete with that. This is one of the reasons why I recommend producers only do one job, because when you want to be slow and take a lot of care when dealing with banners and awards, you want to make sure you have the right one up. There's not a lot of difference between some of them. If someone's getting more than one award, make sure you're listening and paying attention to which award's coming up first. If they're getting a forget-me-not and then an elevation, you don't want to mix those two up. I do try to keep my banners in order, but again, the court docket changes. But this is one of the big reasons why I like having the backup producer or moderator, whoever can run the banners, so that I'm not rushed. I can take my time and I only have to focus on the two things of slides and cameras. One of the tricks I've started doing is I keep the orders of business, elevations, offers, etc., those big ones, in their own little folder. So I have to intentionally go into that. And again, bearing good witness means that we want these moments to be shareable, especially for people not outside the SCA. When you come home and say, I was just elevated to the Order of Chivalry, most people don't understand what that means, but being able to share this moment, being able to share those images is a really great thing, and that's why we're doing this. One of the questions I get asked a lot, and we try to do, is do we have the ability to zoom in or pan tilt? If you have the camera that's capable of it, a Pan Tilt 2 camera are a little bit more expensive, but perfectly viable. And some software has it as well. Logitech Stream Cams, which is what I tend to favor, do have the ability to zoom in and focus, but that has to be done by the on-site person, which means your operator needs to be extra aware of that. They need to be constantly on that, and that adds an added layer of difficulty. When there is lag between audio and video, you really have to start making that call. Are we looking at a fight or are we looking at court? If we're looking at a fight or some kind of competition like that, we'd rather have the video and have the audio lagging behind. We don't want to hear a cheer and not know what happened and then see a choppy image of somebody laying on the ground. For courts, the reverse is true. Hearing all the wonderful things being said is far more important than getting, the laggy video. We'll have people on site, usually we have people taking pictures with their phones, with their cameras, so they're still going to have some of those moments, but they'll lose the words if our audio isn't where it needs to be. And again, separation of duties, not just for yourself or your producer, but when trying to organize your team, Don't ask your main camera that's focusing on the fights to walk over to the shield board and get that information. You should have somebody already on site set up to provide that for you. When you are running the feeds, give grace and dignity. We've covered that before, but don't stay on butt shots of people. Cut away when they're walking up. If they're having trouble getting up, cut to a different cam. If someone happens to wander right in front of your camera and they aren't moving, or they're an exhausted fighter and their kit just happens to be right there, cut away. Don't get them just pouring water on their face. Mute the mic if they're not aware of it, and then contact your operators and ask them to, hey, you're on camera, please move for us. Remember, you set the tone for production. I say remember a lot, but there are so many things to remember that it's worth it. Keep your lists. Keep coming back to this, review this document at least once every time you go to do another live stream, just so you haven't forgotten anything. You set the tone for this production. Keep it light, keep it airy, keep it serious, do what you need to based on the event, based on the people involved. But if you're feeling in a real bad mood, maybe ask your backup producer to step up, and you can just run banners and they can run the rest of it. One of the things I love to do is to keep the thank yous pre-made already before we go with the list of everyone. So I have comments I can just copy and paste. I have banners ready to go. You want to thank your own team and keep that list, because that list is going to grow and get larger, and you will be asked for it, and you're going to have to do recommendations and awards for it. I say have to, but it's going to be a great pleasure to do those. Make sure you thank the event staff, because if the event staff weren't putting all this together, you would have nothing to film. Thank the populace for watching. Thank the nobility and royalty for letting you do this. Everyone who got involved, queue that stuff up so when 12 hours later you're exhausted, you can still give the thanks that you need to. Now, this is a controversial statement, and I know a lot of more professional audiovisual people are probably going to disagree with me, but dead air is okay. It's okay to just leave cameras up facing court. People know then that they're not missing anything. That little bit of anxiety goes away. They'll be able to go grab a sandwich or go to the bathroom. And everyone knows that SCA time is a thing. So dead air, I feel, is okay. If you've got 10, 20, 30 minutes of it, play some music, play some videos. If you have a few minutes of it before court's really ready, or as everyone's switching over, go ahead and use the built-in music and just let it run for a little bit. Change it up so it's not total elevator hold music. But dead air is okay, especially for these kinds of things, especially for 8 hours at a time. It's fine. Remind your crew day of, both on-site and off-site, that you need a little time to respond. That it is going to take you 5 to 10 seconds. They're not going to see that you're trying to set something else up when they have a problem over here, and vice versa, especially for myself, who likes to do everything. Letting my crew handle stuff without annoying them takes a lot of patience on my part. Also know how fast each person runs. If you are just running on a single laptop, jumping between screens is really difficult. One of the harder things to do, because overall we tend to apologize a lot, and I've mentioned this before, don't call out your mistakes, especially if nobody else noticed. The camera goes down, you put up the wrong banner if nothing went horribly wrong. Don't call them out. No one's going to care. They probably didn't even catch it. If there is a big issue, put the apology down in the comments. If there is a major incident, apologize and move on. Get your mod to post it. Or if there was something really, really bad, talk to your seneschal before addressing it. And most importantly, everyone's just happy to have this. Whatever we can add to that event for the people that are at home by choice, or stuck there, or seeing this after the fact, or getting to go back and watch this amazing moment and having it documented, everyone's just so happy to have it, no matter what it is. Now I'm going to take a moment to kind of cover what we've done in the past for setup, at least with the non-tier. So this was for our 12th night, where we had Step Up and Step Down. This was one of the first big productions or court productions that I've been a part of. So we do have an overhead camera up in here, and if you can look, it's actually not visible. It's just tucked right up underneath this little curtain. You can see that little curtain visible here. You can see how we've only got half of the room in camera, which was actually the side where we had our camera set up, so kind of keeps it a little bit nicer. And you can see the rest of the court. You can see that there's seated people stepping forward, the processionals coming down, and we actually had our microphone just on the other side of this pot. And this is why I love this shot, because you get just these beautiful moments here. And again, this is why I do say, instead of going directly overhead, go off to the side so you can catch a couple more recipients. And you can see just all the people. These are beautiful, wonderful shots. So right here, I want to point out this is our primary court camera, and this is actually a different event, Kingdom Arts and Sciences and Queen's Rapier Championship. So you can see our hat kind of off the back side of it, and a little bit of a cloak around it. And we do have a visible processional camera up here. It's this little thing, but again, it's so small and minor, most people aren't going to notice it. And you can also see the X's that we have taped off to really identify where everybody is at. And this is from a virtual court. This is what I mean by the recipient should be in position 1. So this is position 1, and we have 2 and 3 over on the side. That way when we go to put up the slide share, we've got their face in the award. Now this was kind of a hybrid event where we had both people on site and virtual. This was actually hosted in my backyard, and the background was made by my incredible, amazing wife. It is all roses in Checky and Ontier, and it's beautiful. And this might be something that you end up having to do, where we have both the king in one feed and the queen in another. This gear, again, we couldn't do an overhead camera, but we could do a side camera, because I was running this off of 2 little laptops and 1 small table. I actually had the Yeti microphone just off site a little bit. You can probably see it at the bottom of some of these shots to pick up the queen. And then we also had a TV so they can see what's going on. And if you're ever going to do an impersonal interactive court like that, you need to make sure they can also see what's happening on the screen. So we have all 3 people, or all 3 camera shots. We have our recipient camera here, which again was off to the side, and you can see how I tilted the pillow down there so that we'll still be able to capture all the images we wanted. So we have both that, and again, the side shot. And it worked out really, really great. We could adjust it a little bit as needed. And again, just another good shot of the processional camera. And you can't even tell where our overhead was hidden. And I love this one for the overhead because you can see our gear setup. We've made sure no one sits in front of us. We've marked kind of the lines of, hey, there is a camera, there is a microphone here. This is where speakers should talk. You can see, if you're on here, you're going to be on camera. And then here's that processional. Now, it may not always be the best one, but a lot of times you can get some really awesome shots of people coming forward like this. Now, this was from Summit's Coronet. And we have our overhead cam, which is a great shot of this wonderful little hall, including the little Venetian bridge that was built. And you can actually see the overhead camera as a GoPro stuck right up here. And you can see right over here is where we have our camera disguised. We have our shotgun mic. And then because the spread, we had so many thrones, there was a point where, the Prince and Princess of the Summits was really close to us. So we were catching side shots more than front shots, and the overhead was a little out of position, but we did the best that we were able to do. This is when we had to split it and turn it into an Eric. We actually had to reset like 3 or 4 different times as everything shifted and moved. But we set up right on the list table, which is actually right back here. And when I talk about fighter cards, this is what I mean. So we have our processional view, where you can see them coming down from the back, and I would normally keep the processional view up until they hit that bridge, and then I would cut over to the front view. But this is what a fighter card looks like. It was started for October Crown. Baroness of Shoxy is the one that started making them. And so we've been kind of keeping that tradition going where you have the name of the fighter, the name of the consort they're fighting for, as well as their arms, because that's going to be hugely helpful later when you're getting pictures of the shield boards. Your staff can start to reference that. And then a picture of them either individually or together. Sir Bato and Mistress Emma actually won this tournament. Again, we have another shot of our Erics. And so we would have to flip between cameras because some of them are obviously better than others, and we would try to follow the action for it. And it wasn't until evening court that we tried to set up this one right here. We didn't have a good... The overhead cam was fine, and it was giving us a really great view of everything, but we didn't have a good recipient cam, and we didn't have a lot of awards going on in the morning. It was going to be mostly evening. So this is bare bones on a tripod in everybody's way. It annoyed the retinue because they had to work around it and try not to kick it. We had someone sitting in that chair and their retinue kept having difficulties with it. We very carefully positioned this pillow very, very intentionally, and at one point in time it got shifted, so we had to try to get someone back there to talk to retinue, to talk to royalty, to shift it all over again. And then this is the shot that we were getting for the overhead cam. So you can still see it nice and bright and ugly there. But in this case, it was worth it to us. The Queen's sister was being elevated, who is also my Laurel. So this was hugely important that we get it. And everyone understood why we were doing it. Because you get brilliant shots of the ceremony that was happening in front of it, which is a real cool Scythian ceremony. You have your speakers up on that beautiful bridge. Again, you can see our little camera setup. Even just a little bit of disguise goes a long way. And then you get wonderful, amazing shots like this of all the pelicans arrayed around them, the Queen and the recipient. And these are the shots that make everything worthwhile. And we cover the last couple of topics about this. The next one's going to be moderators. Know which locations you are getting your comments from, because you can aggregate between summits or between multiple Facebook pages, multiple YouTube pages. Make sure you understand where those are coming from, and when you respond, make sure you understand who you are responding as. If it's general knowledge, you know, that's fighter so-and-so, just share it to everybody. Makes it a lot easier. People get more information. It's not a bad thing. When you do get those awesome comments, you want to have already talked to your producer about who should be highlighting them. Do you have the authority to just throw those up there? Are you in the Discord chat where you can talk to them and say, hey, I have this. Do you want me to highlight it? Or do you just go on your own? Verify the tone of the court. As moderator, especially when you're dealing with highlighting the comments, that's a very important thing. Are your nobility very lighthearted and fun? Or are they a little bit more serious? Are there times where there's both? You know, if there are big major moments, we want to give them the weight that the recipients want. Engage and encourage people to post photos on social media with hashtags for the event in your kingdom. Again, as moderator, your main job is that engagement, that community building aspect. So make sure you know how to do that. Make sure you are okay with doing that. Some people get a little uncomfortable. But even just asking people to post photos on social media and tag them and give us your thoughts. Who do you think's going to the next round? Maybe, maybe not that. But you know, what's your favorite outfit you've seen today? Those little bits really start to drive up that engagement and make people feel more welcome and more interested in these streams. Also be aware of how the different comments work. Again, YouTube and Facebook work very differently. YouTube has a block ban. Facebook has a delete option. Know what you need to do for each of them, or at least be marginally familiar with them. If you do get a bot, you're usually going to notice them right away. They're going to have big fun Russian letters, and they're going to be posting spam links. Just boot them. Just kick them out right away. Deal with anything else later. Just kick them out. If someone is being helpful but disruptive, if they're watching the feed late and they're answering questions from 3 hours ago, message them privately. Just say, hey, you know, you're a little behind us. Please check the comments. We've answered a lot of that already. If someone's being awful, hateful comments, just being a jerk, screenshot it, ban and delete, report it to your seneschal later. You don't need to give warnings if you don't feel like it. This is in that fun gray area. And before you do that, also talk to your seneschal. That's what mine said. yours might be different. So for awards, we've said this before, we're going to keep saying it because we don't want anyone to forget it. It's always better to be late than early on showing awards and banners. And again, give everyone enough time to read it twice. Go slow, take your time. There are 3 ways to share your awards. This is primarily a producer's role, but there are 3 ways to share the awards. As an overlay, I don't like doing that because it blocks all the other cameras, so it's going to be the whole screen is going to be just that. So you get a really great view of the scroll, but you don't get to see anybody's reactions. It takes a lot of effort on your side to create those overlays and get everything sized and get all the names going. You can do a screen share of photos, so you just have a little folder and share off that folder. I feel like that has too much room for error. If you accidentally click, you're going to go into the next one, and especially because it's a real quick, easy click and not a specific left-right button, I feel that's going to be a little bit problematic. If you are going to go that route, I highly recommend that you keep separate folders for grants, for peerages, for AOAs, etc. And fighter cards for processionals and all of that. Keep a, kind of like you do for your run a show, usually as part of the run a show document. I will keep the fighter cards, what card they're on, whose the names are, if they have a common name versus a fancy title name. Keep that spreadsheet up, because if the processional goes even a little bit out of order, it's going to mess everything up. Double check with your list person, make sure everyone's lined up appropriately. If you know someone on site, like Sir so-and-so is number 1, go ask your friend on site, hey, is Sir so-and-so lined up number 1? Or are they front or back of the line? Because if they're suddenly on back line, maybe we've done a reverse order and just not told us. That's easy enough to accommodate for, but if it's scatter order, that's a lot harder to do. And that's it. I know I didn't cover a lot of on-site director and on-site operator, but it's mostly because I've kind of already covered that. As an on-site director and operator, you need to be aware of things like power and Wi-Fi and all the little tips and tricks. I covered that a lot already in talking about the tech setup. And again, just be open, be communicative with your team, both on-site and remote. And if someone wants to do a little video about how to handle that more, I am happy to assist and get you set up for it, because I think that's a great thing with someone with more experience to talk about. I've only done it once at my house. It was a weird event, so I don't consider that enough to be able to speak authoritatively on this. But that's it. That is running the stream and day of, and I hope you continue to watch. I've got one more part to come.